I will be taking some rosin blinkers out of my Benjamin. I'm tired of seeing the same old Latino tropes on TV. I feel like the more recent portrayals of American Latinos are very surface level. I believe there are a few key points that might begin to connect the experiences of Latinos growing up in the US. I think it's the difficulty of our situations that doesn't get represented on a national scale. I get annoyed when people try to stereotype Latinos based on looks. The Latino family is very structured, and I'm gonna argue it's perhaps too structured. A high percentage of Latino immigrants in the US are from rural backgrounds. Now, I know this is a sensitive topic. Where I see a problem is when I see 5-year-old children that are severely overweight. Latinos are just like anyone else. We need people to talk to, and it feels like the general society of this country doesn't fully accept or understand you. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Latino TV. My name is Gabriel, and today I want to talk with y'all about some issues that are a little more personal and a little more serious than the content I've dropped before this. So I wanted to make this video because I feel like as a Latino in 2025, I'm finding more relatability in memes than anywhere else. And maybe that's just a sign of the times, I don't really know. But personally, I'm tired of seeing the same old Latino tropes on TV. Like On My Block, Encanto, In the Heights, West Side Story. Without getting too much into it, I feel like the more recent portrayals of American Latinos, and emphasis on American, right? American Latinos. I feel like these portrayals are very surface level, and I feel that they don't get into the complexities of the issues that make us act the ways in which we do. Now, one might ask, is there a single Latino experience? Is there a single way in which we can accurately represent every single Latino in the US? And to that, I would say no. However, I believe there are a few key points that might begin to connect the experiences of Latinos growing up in the US, regardless of where you live and what country your parents came from. And what these points really get to is the reality that most Latinos in the US are living through difficult situations. And I think it's the difficulty of our situations that doesn't get represented on a national scale. So I want to share with y'all the 5 aspects of being a Latino in the US that the media doesn't show you. And before I get started, I want to clarify that when I say Latinos, I'm talking about all the genders, right? Not just men. Latinos, Latinas, Latines. However you choose to say it, I'm choosing to say Latinos just to make it easier for myself. And additionally, I will be taking some rosin blinkers out of my Benjamin. After each segment, I will be doing that. So yeah, hopefully by the end of this, I'm still coherent and I can still speak. Matter of fact, let's get started on the blinkers right now since I'm done with my intro script. Cheers. Yo, no reaction, bro. No reaction. Big lungs in the building. All right. Now let's get started on these points. Point number 1 is pretty straightforward, and that is Latinos are extremely diverse. Now, I feel like this shouldn't have to be talked about, but unfortunately, I think it does. I get annoyed when people try to stereotype Latinos based on look, you know, saying that your skin needs to be a certain shade, you have to have a certain kind of hair to pass as Latino. And Dude, people tell me that like I don't look Latino, and it's like, what am I supposed to say to that? You know what I mean? Latinos are so diverse, dude. Like Latin America covers 22 different countries, and this is an area that has about double the population of the US. It's over 650 million people, and of these people, you've got obviously different nationalities, different ethnicities, different ethnic mixes, different cultures, different languages, different dialects of those languages. Like, we're talking about the highest level of human diversity possible here. And now, how do you place all of this diversity into one single label, like the US tries to do with everyone, right? They put us into a little box. That's just what the US does, right? But when you really look at it in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make sense. And Latinos are extremely diverse, so there really is no way to stereotype us based on one specific look. Blinker number 2. Cheers. I was fighting that cough, y'all, but it came out. It had to escape. All right, so on to my next point, and that is toxic family relations. Now, Latinos are extremely family-oriented. Think of any time you've seen a Latino out in public. How often are they alone? Pretty much never, right? We're almost always with family. We're just extremely family-oriented people. And the Latino family is very structured. And I'm gonna argue it's perhaps too structured. Now, the reason I say that is because it feels like the family is structured to the point where we as family members are almost like role-playing. It feels like it's just way too common for us to act fake in front of family. It feels like Latino families, although we live close to each other in proximity, we're not fully transparent or fully honest with each other. Like, there's always some information that we don't disclose to all of our family, right? Because we know that the older generations are just not gonna accept it. Like, for example, if I'm having dinner with my extended family, you know, I'm not gonna start telling them about how I upload YouTube videos hitting blinkers, right? Because I know the older generations are just not gonna get it. But it's not only the younger generations, it's also the older generations withholding information from us. Like, it always feels like there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes on all sides of the family. And as a result, there's always a lot of chisme that forms around every Latino family. And that's simply because there is withheld information that you end up learning from a very specific source of the family. And some of that information you learn might shock you. It might change the way you view a family member, right? And then you understand to a degree why that information was withheld in the first place. It just makes you question everything. And I know for a lot of families, dishonesty leads to infidelity. But then it seems like no matter how toxic or how unfaithful a situation might be, it's pretty difficult to separate the Latino family. And that's because when you're in a family of immigrants, navigating a life in a new country, you're almost forced to rely on each other. And so a lot of families stay together without resolving any issues, which leads to toxic family dynamics and toxic relations within the family. Cheers, y'all. No reaction. None. Zero. So, toxic family relations can also be rooted in my next point, which is rural traditionalism. Now, no matter where you are in the world, the farther you get from big cities and the more you get into the countryside, people tend to be more traditionalist. This is because big cities are focused on progress and innovation, Meanwhile, in the country, people focus more on preserving and maintaining the ways of life that allowed their families to survive on the land for so long. These are people whose families and ancestors have deep historic ties to the land they're living on. And in the case of Latinos, a high percentage of Latino immigrants in the US are from rural backgrounds. But yet, around 90% of Latinos living in the US are living in urban areas, which means they're living in or around big cities. This means that Latino immigrants are not just adapting to a new country, they're adapting to a new level of society in a new country. And that rural background that many Latinos have leads to the passing of many traditionalist ideals. For instance, gender norms. The man in the traditional Latino household has to be this big, strong, emotionless figure whose only focus is to go outside, work with his hands, and bring home the money, right? And then the traditional Latina woman has to be the perfect housewife. She has to clean, she has to cook, she's got to raise the kids, and that's what the woman's roles are, right? So these traditionalist ways of living that have been passed on generation after generation are suddenly interrupted when that first generation of kids no longer grew up on the rancho and instead grew up in the suburbs of a big city in the US. So this transition to an entirely different place where you're now living a different form of life and your kids are growing up under this different form of life. This leads to big ideological divides between the different generations within Latino families. I feel like people stereotype young Latinos for being very liberal and progressive, but what people don't understand is that young Latinos tend to be more progressive as a response to the intense conservatism and traditionalism they grew up with at home. I think a side effect of rural traditionalism among Latinos has led to a lot of misrepresentations of Latin America in American media. Like you see it in movies, TV shows, you know, they put that orange filter, they make everything look run down and everything's impoverished. And that's like the main image that we're shown of Latin America, right? At least that's what it feels like here as an American. But then it feels like we're not shown the bustling downtowns of big cities like Mexico City, Guadalajara, Guatemala City, Tegucigalpa. And I specifically wrote down these cities because I want to emphasize that Mexico and Central America have big cities too, even though the people who are fleeing those countries might be mainly from rural backgrounds. This is to say that there are plenty of young, progressive city people in Latin America. Not everyone in Latin America is a person living in the country with traditionalist ideals. We're not all the way that American media depicts us. All right, going in on blinker, I already lost count, y'all. It's like 3 or 4. Whatever. Cheers. Ooh. I felt that one, y'all. I felt that one. Oh boy, and it gets a little deeper here. All right, so let's move on to my next topic, obesity. Now, I know this is a sensitive topic, and when I'm talking about it, I'm not trying to judge anyone or tell you what the ideal body is like, because, you know, objectively there is no ideal body. Let's just get that out of the way. But now where I see a problem is when I see 5-year-old children that are severely overweight. Those are kids that are not old enough to control what they're eating, right? And that lets me know that there is a social problem at hand. Now, if you do some research, you'll find that Latinos have some of the highest rates of obesity in the United States. And interestingly, these obesity rates are far higher than any obesity rates in any part of Latin America. And now there are many reasons as to why obesity disproportionately affects Latinos. The first of these reasons is food deserts. Many Latinos live in food deserts, which are areas that lack access to healthy or organic food options. And instead, they're filled with fast food places. The next reason is familial practices. Some parents will tell you that you have to finish the food on your plate because when they were growing up, they didn't have that food. And I know that's a reality for a lot of young people, especially Latinos. Now, the third reason is cultural norms. And this especially applies to women, to Latina women. So in a lot of cultures in Latin America, as we know, they really emphasize the voluptuous, curvy female figure. But it goes beyond just pure male sexual attraction. A lot of these cultures actually believe that a fuller female body represents greater fertility. So because of that, it's expected that a young Latina, if she's looking for a man, should at least be carrying a good amount of body fat with her. And the fourth reason, which I think personally most contributes to the obesity we see among Latinos, is what I call the Americanization of cuisine. Now, when it comes to food, American culture prioritizes low cost and efficiency over nutritional value. So meals that can be prepared in a healthy way are instead deep fried or loaded with unnecessary fats, all to save time and money. We've seen this with Italian American cuisine, Chinese American cuisine, and of course, Mexican American cuisine. This is basically how food becomes fast food in America. And for people who don't have a lot of time or money on their hands, fast food is the only realistic source of food. Boy, depressing stuff. Let's take a blinker. Cheers. Oh shit. Y'all, it's raining outside. I still gotta walk to the train station, bro. I might be cooked. Alright, y'all, I'm not gonna lie to y'all. This has been getting harder and harder, but pushing through it, bro. So, the last of my key points of being a Latino is what I'm gonna call mental health awareness. So, Latinos are just like anyone else. We need people to talk to. And that number of people can feel small when it feels like you're more dependent on your family than anyone else, and it feels like the general society of this country doesn't fully accept or understand you. And because a lot of us are brought up in these difficult living situations, navigating a society that we only feel partially connected to, Latinos have a lot of unresolved trauma. And it's due to a variety of factors that it's difficult for mental health resources to reach Latino audiences. So mental illness is a real struggle that affects a lot of Latinos the same way that it affects a lot of people in general. And so the last thing I want to leave y'all with is that when you see a Latino portrayal, a Latino depiction in any form of media, TV, news, memes, whatever it might be, always try to look past the stereotypes. Because unfortunately, I think we are stereotyped a lot in media here in the US. But in reality, you know, we're people just like everyone else. We're sensitive. We're fighting internal battles every day. But most importantly, we just want to be accepted for being ourselves. And that's all I can really ask anyone for, right? Cheers to that, y'all. I think this ended on a good note, y'all. Pretty happy about that. And I'm also happy because of all the blinkers I took. So, yeah, bro. I hope y'all enjoyed this. I hope I was able to at least educate somebody or say something meaningful at least. I hope y'all had a good time just listening to me rant. I hope y'all had some good Zaza consumption along with me. And yeah, I'm gonna sign it off here. Thank y'all for watching Latino TV. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a blessed night, morning, evening, and I'm out.